Hierarchy of souls of deceased Earthlings. As a beginner in interests in so-called spiritual things, I read everything that could be found in the Serbian-Croatian language in the 70s of the last century. And since I was not satisfied with what I read, I started looking for answers myself. All those who allowed themselves to talk about the so-called spiritual things, they spoke and wrote that something of man remains when his body dies. That is correct. However, I was not satisfied with the claims about what remains of a person incorporeally, where it remains, how long it lasts, to whom or what it lasts for and why it lasts, since it could perish like a perishable body. In the meantime, I found the answers to all these questions and put them in writing in many of my texts. Now, first of all, let me specify that what some consider the souls of the dead, I understand as memories, personally unimportant, personally important, and socially important. I consider the latter two to be useful knowledge, and I consider the first to be socially irrelevant data of an intelligent individual, regardless of how intelligent or even weakly intelligent. Secondly, I will call any memory, living or deceased, a soul here, but so that you don't forget the following: it makes no sense to talk about souls as entities independent of the body before the birth of the body, nor after the death of the body. The soul is born with the body, that is, the ability of the brain to work in the interest of the body to which it belongs. The soul dies functionally with the body, but continues to exist with what it acquired in the body. Lasts like a book. That means with all the joys and misfortunes, which the mental being has done to himself, doing something for yourself and others. And to experience or conclude something new, it cannot be without the brain, because as I said, the soul is the activity of the brain in matters of interest to the bearer of the brain. So, it seems that life, considering the short duration of man on earth, has no meaning. If we look at the cycles of the Absolute, then with that in mind, maybe it is better for a person to kill himself immediately, as soon as he realizes that nothing is eternal. However, we see that many people prefer to live stupid and happy, rather than striving for bliss for here and there. Although bliss requires much less effort than happiness. Bliss is close to anyone who is not selfish, who is not quarrelsome, and who does not harm others. So, for bliss, you need a little brain and some inaction, and for happiness, you need a lot of stupidity. The dead continue a relatively limited permanent energetic existence, with the themes of his bliss for here and there, or with the themes of his struggle to gain happiness here. After the death of the body, the soul of a benevolent former earthling is active as little as it is in a living person while he sleeps and dreams. Now, when a living man sleeps and dreams, it is not the same whether he dreams of beasts and monsters, or flowery meadows, music and beautiful people. The soul of a deceased person exists with the entire intellectual capital it acquired here. There are no repairs. There are no erasures. Whether we mourn the deceased or not, we cannot do anything for him. With his last breath, he can no longer change anything in his stock of memories. The meaning of living in the body can be thought about on the basis of this fact: everything has its end. Everything disappears and ends at any time. Everything that an honest man experiences in his life makes him happy or blessed. The fact is that a human being can exist blissfully even in the body, on this planet, for millions of years. Blissful and active, with all the joys of his body and mind. For this to happen to people, all people would have to want a long life in earthly bodies, and with the newly established genetics of human beings, have permanent defragmentation in the organelles, mitochondria. What Dr. Alexandra Trifunovi, from Bar, Montenegro, showed and proved at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, and what was published in the scientific journal Nature. Evilders are not comfortable even in such short lives on Earth, so it is quite certain that Evilders cannot be positive factors of the new genetic structure of the human species, but rather they are disruptive. That is why we must separate evil people from the noble and charitable, and destroy the most evil people, according to the laws of human communities, without compromise. Because they, villains, are also uncompromisingly selfish. If we are by absolute intelligence, in the set of possibilities, necessary and inevitable in the cosmos, an absolute intelligence offers us the possibility to, for the work of refining raw energy, enjoy 1,000,000 years of joys on this planet. We are weak-minded if, for the so-called immortality of a few million years, we don't decide, but we continue to live like this, globally speaking, primitively. I explained how the genetic code of a species is easily changed, by no long-term evolution, but through a single generation of parents and newborns. There are two things about this long-term living. We humans, like other intelligent beings in the cosmos, are beings with the purpose of transforming raw energy, expressed as 9 forms, in elements and compounds, into 10, what is energy with identities, as thoughts. Refined. Shepherds of human souls are psychoengineers, from scientifically and technologically developed civilizations, who keep one noble human soul for copying into a new body, into a new biological carrier, into a new being with the same physio-mental capital and characteristics of the deceased, which during his life on Earth developed to general use. However, for Earthlings it is like a herdsman releasing his cows into the wilderness as soon as they start giving milk, and then some dairy workers come and pick up adult cows. If we humans want each of us and our species to live here for a long time, then we must perform a correction on our genetic code, which enables existence individually in the original, and not as copied in 1, 10s or 100s. All this means that the psychoengineers do not care whether we serve the Absolute, as beings with a purpose, intellectually original or copied from them, psychoengineers. Every human copy exists in the delusion that it is the original. In the copied body, it still has a brain and can continue to live concretely and progress intellectually. But such originals and such copies are not essentially different, because both here and there they exist by themselves. Like, I said, bound books. There are certainly no bio- and psychoengineers in the cosmos, as much as there are physiological remains of some intelligent beings of the cosmos, so that those engineers could re-embody or, as it were, copy everything. And it is pointless to expect God to deal with such trifles. That is, there is no basis for expectations that the deceased Earthlings will rise from their graves. Because what kind of discrimination would it be from God if he resurrected only Christians, and not people of other faiths and those who died before the birth of Jesus Christ? Although it is not excluded that bio- and psychoengineers, from the memory of the planet, will physiologically activate all the benevolent people ever buried. If someone is now wondering about the food and infrastructure of tens of billions of resurrected and living people on Earth, one should know that an energetic being, neither resurrected nor alive, needs neither food, nor highways, nor sewage for its existence. Definitely, everything comes down to the value of the memory of the deceased. Those who lived on earth only as benevolent people remain in the sphere of personal memories with themselves, non-communicative among equals, and especially non-communicative with the so-called enlightened, sanctified, blessed, i.e. remain non-communicative with God. Just as the first mentioned did not understand the second mentioned during their lifetime in their bodies, so nothing attracts them in their afterlife. The enlightened and the blessed live communicatively both among themselves and with the Absolute. Because they opened up to knowledge for all people and Absolute, even during their existence in earthly bodies. Those who lived maliciously on earth will experience salvation when they are, as sets of memories, erased from the planet's memory. The criminals will not be aware of this salvation, but salvation is salvation. A living man wakes up with relief from a dream full of horrors and dangers in a dream. And salvation will come to the deceased criminals, which they will not enjoy, because they will be thrown back into some form of raw energy. So they will not exist even for themselves as an unpleasant form of energy with content. The memory of a criminal is a negative energy, so it is more functional for the existence of well-intentioned people to resolve it into a contentless one. In the end, it must be admitted that every person can ask the question, on what basis can it be claimed that the souls of deceased enlightened earthlings exist fully actively, within in the absolutely existing God? As they lived embodied on earth, or where else? Well, here it is. We are witnesses that there are living beings on earth whose scene of living and mental development is water or above ground, specifically, trees, mountains and lower layers of the earth's atmosphere. And with them, even the animals that live in the forests, rainforests and shallow soil layers of the planet, do not achieve anything in the so-called spiritual development. Just as the species of dinosaurs did not achieve anything on Earth for millions of years, without speech, without fingers and walking, absolute beings cannot be understood by fish or birds, as extinct animal species could not. Further, every intelligent person understands the value of the knowledge, experience, work and skills of a farmer and the value of wheels, gears, nuts and bolts, steam pots, sewing machines, electric motors, electronics as a whole, pleasantness in the arts. Everything that is useful to us for life on earth is directly or indirectly necessary for understanding the Absolute and us humans in it. So it can be said that agriculture and technology are at the service of the spiritual development of members of the man species. In the service of building morale. In the service of philosophy. What were the bow and arrow in prehistoric times? Of the arts, the most useful for the spiritual and philosophical development of people is music. Although holography is a higher art, because it is an imitation in the sphere of the first existing, in light. Poetry and prose are games of the mind, which can also have educational values, but they are primarily forms of entertainment. A man who, with all the facilities for life on earth, understands the Absolute, as a retired person no longer needs either the brain or the existential educational means, which are functional for his existence in the body, as in the physically active chemistry unit. The enlightened one rests in a disembodied form, as physiologically active physics, the position of God, i.e., a drop in the ocean is at rest, which is aware of itself and the whole in which it exists. The soul of a deceased enlightened man is not the bound book of a well-intentioned but unenlightened deceased earthling. The position of God is God himself. So, the enlightened Earthling created for himself what he could have in his body on Earth, that other members of the species helped him about that. If I have to specify again what it means, so be it. What the enlightened person makes for himself for the so-called eternal life after the death of the body, a whole species can create for itself while living in bodies on Earth. And that means we need a Confederation Earth. In order to rise spiritually, without abusing agriculture and technology for destructive, colonialist and selfish animal purposes.